Okay, so Lori, you were living in California with this man who called himself your husband,
Hmm.
but basically he held you captive for 4 years in California. So tell me, what kind of a person would do this? What kind of a person was he?
Yes. Well, first of all, Stephanie, thank you so much for having me on your show. This is very important to get the awareness out. What type of person was he? Well, someone you would least expect, and usually abusers are, you know, charismatic, charmer, uses words carefully, reeled you in, so to speaking, was there like a helper to you. But once you got up underneath him, things changed, and that's what happened in my case.
Okay, okay. So give us a little bit of
Hmm.
a background on
Hmm.
how did you meet him and
Hmm.
how did this situation come about?
Yeah. Well, I was married to my husband, Muhammad Shabazz,
Mm-hmm.
and we had two children together, Miriam and Muhammad. And what happened was we had two businesses. We had a Shabazz Fish and Chips in California, and right across the street we had a little bookstore boutique. And so my husband, he truly a good man in heart, but he was, with the brothers at the mosque, he was selling illegal firearms. And so eventually he was caught doing so because he was not doing the paperwork correctly. So he went to jail for that. While he was incarcerated, and I was just not the business savvy type of person he was, the businesses were going down. I eventually had to close them. So I needed help. And I went to the mosque around the corner from where we lived, and I asked them for help. And the imam there referred me to a brother there named Musa. And also he said, your husband knows him too. And he has a family and he can assist. And I thought that was a wonderful idea. And he knew of our, situation and everything. And I said, oh, great. So once we all got together, he agreed to help, and I met his wife, and he had other children. And I said, wow, this is going to be really nice. They can help, with the business a little bit. We can kind of maybe close one but keep the other. And I was so behind on bills. He came up with this great idea. He said, well, why don't you just move in with us temporarily till your husband gets out, and then you can save money and get back on your feet that way. And I said, there you go. So that's how I got into the situation in the beginning.
Okay.
Hmm.
What, he said you could move in with his family and this
Right.
was a temporary thing.
Hmm.
What do you think made you so vulnerable, or how did you end up continuing to stay in this situation for all those years?
Well, after moving in with him, we ended up really closing the last final business. So here I was now. My husband was incarcerated. I had two small children, and basically at this point, no income. So you're at the mercy. The little income I did have, I pretty much was given for attorney fees for my husband. And you're pretty much at the mercy. You're vulnerable. You have nowhere to go, and kind of speaking, you're staying with this family temporarily, and your future looks a little bleak. You just don't know what's going to happen at this point. Your goal is really to just stay for a minute until he gets out, and then you move on. But I think Moose's tensions were a little different, and he wasn't sharing those ideas with me. So once I was there with him for a while, and I just start seeing, once you move in with someone, you start seeing things and you didn't agree with. But I kept my mouth closed because that was his home, and that's how he raised his children. It had nothing really to do with me. But then that ended up changing too, down the line, and it affected me and my children. And then that's when, we had words and things turned a little worse.
Mm-hmm,
Hmm.
mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess I still want to get to this question because I'm
Hmm.
trying to help other women.
Right.
Um, what, besides the bills,
Hmm.
what do you think made you especially vulnerable to just kind of go along with him?
Hmm. Hmm.
once things began to change? And also, did you at some point start to think of yourself as his wife?
Right. Oh boy, yes. Well, I was vulnerable because, like I said, with no money and really nowhere else to go. I was living in California, and all my people were here in Cleveland. So right there, you didn't have family around you, and that's a plus too. There's someone else to talk to. He kept us away from everyone, and I think he did that intentionally. He used Islam, he used the religion a lot, to separate the women, to keep us away from society. He didn't want anyone to work or even go to school. So it was like, you were just away from everyone. It was almost a brainwashing tool. I think later on I picked up on that he was using, and they call it too back in the day, it's Stockholm syndrome, when you kind of just agree with your captor, you kind of just starting to break down, and everything he's saying is right, and maybe you're wrong, and that's what it was happening to me. But I knew better though, because I had the life before. And so I know this was not the right way. Because eventually you do snap out of it, but it takes time. But now once you do realize this is not the way you want to live, you have to get out of it. And he knew I was trying to do that. And that's when the threats and intimidation started to play.
Okay. Talking about threats and intimidation, do you think you can actually describe the fear? Do you still remember, or is it too painful? Do you block it out?
No, you don't forget. You never forget. And even way after the situation, I had constant nightmares, me and the children. The threats are real, and he actually, went upon them. He beat the children, he beat me, even his own wife and his own children. So he was a force not to play with. He would tell us all the time, we lived up in a rural area, a part of California, and he would say, I would bury all of you in the backyard and no one would ever know. And I took that serious. And it's just his whole mannerism. It was walking eggshells around him. One minute he'd be okay, next minute he'd be depressed, next minute he'd be all right, the next minute he'll be angry. And so it was just really a doom and gloom situation.
Okay. I want to talk about the religion a little bit, and people use religion, all kinds of religion, to have their goals met,
right?
What have you?
Right.
I've always wondered this too, especially for Muslim women who are fully covered.
Yes.
Do you think that would kind of give you a feeling of you don't exist?
Well, Islam is a beautiful religion, and don't get me wrong, it's the people that will twist it around, definitely. And when you see women covered and they're veiled, they're in purdah, it's called, and some wear complete purdah, total, and some maybe half veil. And it just shows their piety, their virginity, showing that they're not loose women, they're not, exposed with skin exposed, or tightness of garments or their hair, because they don't want to attract that attention to men. So that's what they're doing when they wear this. And to show that they don't exist, I won't say that it doesn't show that really. It just shows really the men may be taking it to a different degree though. They use that as a way of controlling, I believe so. And so women now, like even Saudi Arabia, they're getting their freedom back, if you will, They're voicing their freedom. They're in politics now. They're going to school. But, way back in those days, those dark days, women were put under a lot of pressure because of that, the way they dressed.
Now, do you think of your situation as one of domestic violence, or did you consider yourself more as a captive?
Wow, I say a little both, but more so towards the end, a captive for sure, because there was no way out of that situation. He kept my children separated from me, so that way he knew I wouldn't leave without them. And eventually, like I said, with the technique of the brainwashing he tried to use with us, letting him know that he was in charge. He's, Islam showing that, he's got like a overseer over me until your husband gets back with you, and you shouldn't be a loose woman alone in the world. And these things he was putting out there, it made me feel like, well, maybe he was right. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. But I didn't know better. And it's just the way his whole demeanor on things, Stephanie, he just really was, those two words that women have to learn is power and control. And that's what he used on us, even down to the little ones, So it was a way I had to break away from that period. And once I even tried to leave, he would threaten me, threaten my kids. He even brandished a gun in front of us. He attacked me several times. So it was at a point that your spirit just breaks down and you just say, well, I just won't leave right now, just for a safety mode, because it's survival time now at this point. If you do it right away, he could kill us all. Maybe you need to think this through and don't be so rash and, find a different way. So I started planning, and I started writing little notes. And just in case if anything did happen to me, someone would find this and let us know, let them know what was happening to all of us in this home. Because he was really torturing us, all of us, even down to the children, withholding food from them if they didn't know their prayers. He had them standing up in a corner for punishment, not just for hours, we're talking about for days, overnight. And so it was just so bad that the children, their growth was stunted because they're no exercise, no sunlight, they wouldn't go out the house. They were malnutrition. Matter of fact, one who was like 16-year-old was only 4'5". So they were in all bad shape. They were literally dying, emotionally and spiritually.
Well, let's talk about your strength, because that's what brought you out of this situation. And first of all, where did that strength come from?
Well, always in a greater power. I always believe in God, and I knew eventually, he would set us free. And God is best of planners. Even when we plan our lives, his plan is always the best. And I knew it was a way that, he would open the door and get us out all safely, because I knew with my plan, probably somebody would get hurt. So I waited, for signs. I waited, to see. And I kept writing and kept doing my diary. And eventually there was an opportunity moment. And I knew it was nothing but God, because every other plan I thought of doing kind of failed. So I knew this was perfect. And then what happened when we had moved in this last place up in the hills. Like I said, he loved rural areas where no one can hear our screams, no one can hear anything or see anything going on to be suspicious. So we moved in this part of town called Awanga. It's like Indian reservation, way up in the mountains in Temecula. And the post office is way at the bottom of town. So they don't come and deliver the mail to you. They might put a sticker on your door saying you have a package, but they don't deliver mail. You go there. So a package did come from me. A letter came from me certified. He couldn't do it. He tried to sign for it, but he couldn't. That's what my opportunity moment happened. He had to bring me into town to get this letter. And that's when he took me in. As I waited in line, I was able to take the letter up under my garment, because I hid it on my undergarment. And I was able to slide it to the postal worker just when he was striking up a conversation with someone in line. It was him and another man. They were just talking. And this was just my blessing right here, that I could just make eye contact with this woman. I couldn't talk to her, but she had a feeling, she felt my vibes, that something was not right. And when she saw me pull my dress up in front of her and reach and pull this letter out, And I could see her eyes getting wider, like, what is going on? And I put it on the counter. She took it right away, and she put it up underneath. At that very moment, I just knew he saw it because he called my name out real harsh. What's taking so long? And I said, oh, well, she's going to get the package for me, and she had me to sign for it. And she went in the back and got it and brought it back. And we left. And I looked back at her as we were going out the door, and she just nodded. That's all she did, just nod. That was it. I didn't have any inkling what was going to happen after that. She could have just ignored it, threw it away, read it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But she did get authorities there, because the next day they did come and get us out.
Just a little more, how did you summon or gain the courage to do that? You talked about a diary.
Right.
So was that part of what gave you the courage to do that?
It's the strength in writing and putting things down. It is. And that was my only outlet. I just felt like this was the end for me. I really did. Or one of us was going to die in this house. Either the children or somebody. But I had to start writing and to get this out to someone. I had no idea how I was going to get it out. But I figured that time would come later. But let me just start making notes and documenting everything that was happening to us. And I would write day and night. I flipped it over and wrote on the back. It started off to be maybe a 12-page and ended up being over 13, 14 pages. So, yeah, and I would fold it up every night and I would sleep with it because I had made sure that, he didn't find it or nothing happened to it. But that gave me the strength, just praying every night, talking to God and writing.
Now, do you know what happened to the other children, to the other wife? Are you ever in contact with them at all?
In the beginning, I did have contact with his, what do you want to call his actual wife, who was legally married too. They gave her time off because she was incarcerated also, and they gave. So we were talking about right now.
We were talking about.
We're going to go back to
the other people. But yeah,
the people, right?
Yeah,
that's
but
right.
I'll talk about them after.
Okay. Okay.
Count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so Laura, let me ask you, what happened after the mail clerk got that letter from you?
I found out later through the LA Times. Her name was Ruth. And if you ever saw the clip of the LA Times, they'll have a picture of her there. And I did get a chance to speak to her. Thanks to the LA Times, Irfan Khan, the photographer, was there and he let me call her. He called on the phone and he let me talk to her. And I was able to thank her so much for what she did for us. But because of what happened, we were alive today. And she took that letter, and I found out, and she took it to her supervisor, and they got authorities involved. When they came that next day, early in the morning, and it had to be like about 4:35 in the morning. Caught everybody off guard, because he was still asleep. And I was in the garage with the children, and they were asleep. And I couldn't sleep. I was still buzzed from just a few hours ago being at the post office, wondering, what's going to happen to us? What did she do with that letter? Are we going to get out or not? Or am I going to start it all over again? Or, so my mind is just, my adrenaline's just pumping. I couldn't even sleep. It was about that time I started hearing like cars driving. And if you're up there in that part of town, you would know, you can hear a pin drop, especially at night. And I can hear, and I thought maybe someone was just coming down the road going to another home down the hill. But it stopped. And I could actually hear people getting out of the car, because you can hear crunching and gravel, and they were coming closer. And my heart was just beating, and this time, like, who is this, And then it stopped for a minute, and I heard nothing. And then suddenly, that's when I heard the banging. And when they say police bang, they bang. It was a boom, 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 boom. They shook the door, rattled, and my children jumped. And I said, "Oh my God, this is it, this is it." And they said, "Well, Mommy, what's it?" And I said, "We're getting out of here today. This is the day we are getting out of here." And they were just smiling, but they didn't know, they still didn't have the idea what was going on. And when the police banged on the door, the other children in the home, I can hear them scrambling, going to get him, "Daddy, Dad, someone's at the door, someone's at the door." And finally, eventually he got to the door, and he yelled through the door first, "Yeah, can I help you?" And they asked for me. They said, "This is the Hemet Sheriff Department. We'd like to see Laura Cowan." And he said, just a minute. Now, at this time, he had chains on the door. He had chains on all the doors. And I mean these thick lock chains with locks on them. And they'll show you that, too, in the clip at the LA Times. And he had to take those chains off. He had to go get the key, take the lock off, unravel the chain. Now, the officer on the other end, but it was two of them at that time, was wondering what in the world. He cracked the door open, and they said, "We were here to see Laura Cowan." He says, "I'll get her for you." I heard him say that. Now, when he pushed the door back, right to the side is the garage door that leads out to the garage. He hammered that shut. That's how he kept me in. He had to actually get the hammer and take the nails out of the door. When he got him out, he looked inside. He says, he called me Salima at the time. He said, "You know why they're out here? The police are out here." And I go, "I don't know. They're asking for you. Don't you know?" "I don't know anything. I don't know anything," I told him. And he said, "Well, come out here and let's see what they want." So I came out, and my kids were just trembling, like, "Mommy, don't leave us." I said, "Don't worry, honey. Stay right here. I'll be back." And so we went out to the door. I was in front. He was right behind me. I mean, when I said behind me, I could feel his breath on my neck. And when we opened the door, it was Officer Fogel. I remember his name. And he had another deputy with him. And he had in his hand a copy, but it wasn't my letter. It looked like it could have been a copy of it. And he said, "I'd like to talk to you." And I said, "Sure." And I motioned behind, him. What about him? And he picked up on it very well. He says, "I want to talk to you alone." And that's when he went crazy. Musa went crazy. "Oh, no, you can't talk to her alone. I'm her husband. That's against our religion for her to be with another man." And, just on and on and on. And he had the other officer to detain him to the side. He took me around the corner to the house. And he says, "I got this letter here. Did you write this?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I wrote it." And I gave it to the clerk. And then that's when we started discussing the letter and what was going on. And I said, "My children are inside. I want them out of there because I don't know what this man is going to do." And I told him everything. He says, well, we're going to arrest him. And I'm calling my supervisor. And he clicked his little radio and he called for backup. And the next thing I know, they had just tons and tons of law enforcement arriving. And they actually arrested him, put him in a car. They went and got my children out of there. And they also talked to the other children. They called social services, and it just went on and on. So it was an all-day ordeal, but we were free that day. And I told my kids, "You're finally free." And they were just, I couldn't explain the look on their faces of being free from there. It was amazing.
And you had all three of your children with you at that point?
Yes, all three, because he took my little one, Taslima, and he kept her in the house with his wife. Matter of fact, he took her totally away from me. So she wasn't even in the garage with me and my other two children, Muhammad and Miriam. She stayed in the main house with him and his wife.
Well, wow, that must have been some powerful letter, and at some point I would like to talk to you about exactly what it contained.
Yes.
But you talked about the other children. I don't know if the wife was there at that time, but have you been able to keep in contact with them?
Yes, I've kept in contact with several of them. A few moved on to other cities. And my daughter, my youngest one, who is their half-sister, does have contact with them throughout with Facebook and phone calls. So they do keep in touch with one another.
Now let's talk about the healing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How have you been able to heal? And do you feel like you are completely healed? And if not, how do you continue to work on getting better?
Well, that's a lot of questions in one. And no, I don't feel like I'm completely healed, because there are times, even when I can hear something or see something, and it kind of takes me back to that moment. So it's like it's something you never forget. The children and I, we went through 10 years of therapy, 10, through Beechbrook and Applewood. So it was a lot to go through, from in-home therapy, outpatient therapy, art therapy. They've had it all, from even medication, because they were on medication for a while for severe depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. So time has gone on. Time is the healer, and keeping busy is the healer, because by them going back to school and implementing back into life and getting involved with the friends and sports and activity, they were able to heal that way. With me, my healing comes more into giving back. And that's where I volunteer now at the Domestic Violence Center here in Cleveland. And I do work with them. I done work with the Rape Crisis Center. So this is how I get my healing back. It's just helping others now. And it's so many women out there, they may not be going through the extreme like I did, but they're going through their own hell. So if I can just give them awareness, give them some tools, let them know, red flags and warning signs, it helps somebody, it helps me.
Okay. So you are much better now. You are an advocate and a crusader for the eradication of domestic violence and empowering women.
Yes.
And recently you've appeared in national media. You're doing this interview with me. You've just received a lot of accolades and recognition. Tell me about that, and how does that make you feel?
It's nice and all, don't get me wrong, but it's not about me. I don't want it to be about me. I want it to be about the awareness of it all. It's just helping other people, especially our teens and our young people. It's just a way of healthy relationships and dating, because I see that that's just really, they need a lot of help in that area. And so I just want to be able to now to use my voice and use my story and to help other women, and even men, because there are men, believe it or not, that goes through domestic violence.
Okay. Okay. You do the domestic violence, I don't want to call it counseling, but you speak to people who have been involved with domestic violence. Do you also speak to those who are the abusers, or?
Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Matter of fact, through my job at CMHA, we have several programs. We have one once a year they call Sister Share, and we break out into workshops, and I've had workshops with the women there. This one coming up next month is called Brother to Brother, and I did it last year, and I really thought the lady who implemented the program, Jackie Griffin, we said, it probably won't be a large crowd, but we'll have a nice room for you, and you can, talk to the men and show them resources and bring material. That was a packed room, standing room only. Her mouth dropped. So this year they're going to have a larger area. And I was able to talk to men about that. There were men who actually I did role play with there. And there were men who got up and spoke and they admitted that they have anger issues. Why? And it could be anything, from the economy to whatever, not having a job, and they struck their wife. So a lot of that came out. And these men need that. They need an outlet, because domestic violence is different with men. They don't report like they should. I don't know if it's a macho thing or, and I tell the men, like I told them in the sessions, the way the government works, they have to see the numbers. There's numbers, there's programs. If you guys don't report and show that there's a need out there, you won't get the resources as much. Women got a lot of it. They do report, but the men just don't. So there's not a lot of like sessions for men to go to or outlets for them to really vent and talk to. So this is really important. I appreciate CMHA for having that once a year because it's so important. Our residents right there in those estates, they're going through it.
Well, you know what? It has just been so wonderful talking to you. I know that,
Countdown.
we'll start with your husband's death.
Okay,
first,
okay.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure that.
I'm thinking if we start with that.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so near the beginning of our discussion here of the interview, we talked about what kind of man this Musa was. So eventually he was incarcerated, and tell us about what's going on with him now.
Yeah, well, he'll never see the light of day and never be able to hurt another woman or child again. The judge sentenced him to 7 consecutive life terms. So he's in there. And so the children and nobody will have to worry about, the fear of him getting out ever again. Okay. And I think even in the trial, his daughter, one of his daughters, was concerned of that, because she was fearful that he would get out. Because she knows how the system works, It could be a revolving door, but no, he's in there for good.
And so he's in a prison somewhere in California.
Yes.
Okay. Now, after he was incarcerated and then your husband was released from jail.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
And that was awesome because he finally got out. I was in the shelter at the time, and when you first get out of prison, he had to go to where they had like a Hathaway home for a minute, and until they kind of implement him back into the society. And he hooked up with some of his Muslim brothers and got a job. And, we getting in place together, and everything was just so happy. The kids were happy to see him again, and I was happy to see him again. It was like an ordeal, it's like waking up from a bad dream, and it was all over, and now you're starting your new life. And, oh, wow, it's just kind of emotional. But, he passed away, so he died of a heart attack. And they didn't get a chance. We didn't get a chance to have that happy family dream, but I don't know.
How long was he home before
Oh,
this happened?
I would say a month. I would say about a month, yeah. Yeah. Because we were all together and doing things while he was in the Hathaway home, but actually moved in and got together, and he had an apartment, and everything was just great, and thinking of things and plans and putting the life back together again. But like I said, God has his plans. I don't question anything.
So I'm sure that's part of the healing that you're still doing.
Yeah, definitely part of the healing. Yeah.
And so, when did that happen? What year was
Oh
that?
gosh, 2001.
2001.
Yeah.
Okay.
January 16th he died. And when he passed away, we were out of the shelter and all, but they had made a way that they would connect services to wherever we went. And I didn't want to stay in California. I didn't want to stay there because of the memories. It was too much. And with him gone too, it was like no reason for me to be there. So I told them I would like to go home. That's where I want to go. And so they hooked us up with, Applewood out here and other services. And I talked to my family, and we transitioned back to Cleveland. And I got a house there, and then that's when our healing began. Yeah.
So you grew, to lighten the mood a little bit, you grew up here in Cleveland.
Yeah, born and raised.
And so you were in California for?
I'd say 16 years. Quite a bit. I went out there I was young. I must have been about 21, 22 when I first went there, watching the Rose Bowl parade on TV, and I was single and young with no kids. I say, hey, let me just go out here and see what it's about. You know, I might love it. And I did love it. California was awesome.
And when you came back to Cleveland, did it seem a lot different?
Ooh, quite a bit. Yes, everything's changed, new buildings, things gone. I think the thing that got me was watching my children that first year, for the first time they saw snow and didn't like it. So I said, well, welcome to Cleveland. But it's okay. I told them, you don't have to stay here. You know, go to school, and you got a whole life ahead of you now. So enjoy life and just go where you want.
And your son, he's in California now?
Yeah, he's in school there. So yeah, he went back to San Jose. So, you know, everything's good for everyone. My daughter now, she graduated, so she's thinking about going to New York. She's going for fashion and design. That's the place to go. It's like, oh boy, the big lights, the big city. Why do you want to go to big places alone? But that's another story. I told them, no matter where you go, home is right here. You know, if it doesn't work out, you can always come back. So now I got the last one, the little one, which is his child too. And well, she wants to go to Europe. That's her plans. So she wants to go into acting and things like that, and I'm trying to help her into her career. So I think they all got good, promising lives. It's a blessing, you know, and I'm going to help them as much as I can. But I think even with her, too, she has that emptiness inside sometimes of wanting, she has questions, and she always comes to me, you know, like, why did Daddy do this to us? And she asks the same thing, what type of person was he? So I just don't know really, you know, I think she has that void there too. And I don't know how to close the door there. That book may be always open for her. You know, children always have that wanting, that sense of wanting to know. Who knows, maybe one day she will even try to reach out to him. I won't ever, you know, discourage that. But, you know, that's how she will have to heal and close her door.
Well, sounds good. Sounds like everybody's got a bright future ahead of
Yes,
them, and
yes,
you're going to continue to do your work and
definitely.
help empower other women.
Most definitely. I think this is my advocacy word to the end. This is what I'm going to do.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.